Welcome to everyone in our channel. This journey through one of the most powerful and dramatic stories in history, a tale of strength, betrayal, and redemption. Set in ancient Israel, this story is more than history. It is a reflection of human nature, choices, and the consequences that follow. So let us step back in time to the era of Judges, where Samson's extraordinary tale unfolds. Our story begins with a miraculous promise. The Israelites were oppressed by the Philistines, and God sought a deliverer. An angel appeared to Manoah's wife, a woman unable to have children, and declared, "Samson was born with incredible strength, a gift from God." As a Nazirite, he took vows: no wine, no contact with the dead, and no cutting of his hair. But Samson's strength was not only physical, he was called to be a spiritual leader, a judge. Yet as we'll see, even the strongest can falter. Samson's feats of strength were legendary. He tore a lion apart with his bare hands, defeated armies single-handedly, and even carried the gates of a city on his shoulders. But Samson had a weakness, a wandering heart. Despite his calling, he often strayed from God's path. His desire for Philistine women brought him trouble time and again. Samson's first marriage ended in betrayal, igniting a cycle of revenge between him and the Philistines. His choices often blurred the line between personal vengeance and his divine mission. This pattern led him to Delilah, the woman who would change everything. Delilah, a name that echoes through history. The Philistines saw her beauty and cunning as a weapon to exploit Samson's weakness. They offered her a fortune to uncover the secret of his strength. 3 times Samson deceived her with false answers, but her persistence wore him down. Finally, he revealed the truth. Samson, once Israel's mighty judge, was now a prisoner, humiliated, blinded, and powerless. The Philistines celebrated his downfall, mocking him at a great feast to honor their god, Dagon. But Samson's story didn't end in despair. In his weakness, he turned back to God, praying for one final act of strength. Samson's final act killed more Philistines than he had in his lifetime. Though flawed, his story reminds us that God can use even our failures for his purposes. Samson's rise and fall reveal the complexity of human nature, the struggle between calling and weakness, pride and humility. His life is a cautionary tale about the dangers of compromise and the consequences of straying from our purpose. Yet it is also a story of redemption. Despite his failures, Samson's faith in his final moments allowed him to fulfill his mission. What can we learn from Samson? Perhaps it is this: strength alone is not enough. True power comes from faith, humility, and obedience to a higher calling. So as we leave this story behind, let us reflect on our own lives. Where is our strength rooted? Are we living up to our purpose, or are we distracted by the allure of Delilahs in our world? Samson's story is not just his own, it is ours as well. May we rise from our failures and fulfill the purpose we are called to. Manoah and his wife were childless, longing for a child. Then one day an angel appeared to her with astonishing news. This child was to live under a holy vow. He would drink no wine, touch nothing unclean, and never cut his hair. His life would be a symbol of total dedication to God. Samson grew to be unmatched in strength, a physical giant with a divine calling. But even in his early years, the seeds of his struggles were evident. His passions, unchecked, would lead to both triumph and tragedy. Samson's strength was legendary. He defeated a lion as easily as if it were a young goat. Later, he found honey in the lion's carcass, a sweet victory over death itself. Yet Samson's strength was accompanied by a weakness, a desire for Philistine women, enemies of his people. Against his parents' warnings, Samson insisted on marrying one. At his wedding feast, Samson posed a riddle to the Philistines, wagering their defeat. But when his bride betrayed his secret, Samson burned with anger and vengeance. This cycle of betrayal and revenge marked Samson's life. Though called to deliver Israel, his personal vendettas often overshadowed his divine mission. Then came Delilah, the woman whose name would forever be synonymous with betrayal. The Philistines offered her a fortune to uncover the secret of Samson's strength. 3 times Samson toyed with Delilah, giving her false answers, but her persistence was relentless. And so, the mighty Samson fell, betrayed by the woman he trusted. His strength left him, and he was taken prisoner by the Philistines. Blinded and imprisoned, Samson was a shadow of his former self. The Philistines mocked him, forcing him to grind grain like an ox. But in his suffering, Samson began to turn back to God. In his weakness, he rediscovered his dependence on the one who had called him. During a great feast in honor of their god, Dagon, the Philistines brought Samson to entertain them. Chained between two pillars, he prayed for one final act of strength. In his death, Samson fulfilled his mission. He struck a devastating blow against Israel's enemies, but at the cost of his own life. In the days when judges ruled Israel, the people cried out under the heavy hand of the Philistines. For 40 years they lived in fear, their spirit crushed. But God, ever faithful, was preparing a deliverer, a man whose life would be marked by extraordinary strength and extraordinary struggles. Tonight we journey through the rise and fall of Samson, a man chosen by God, but undone by his own desires. His story is not just a tale of ancient history, it is a mirror of our own struggles with purpose, power, and redemption. Samson's birth was a miracle, his destiny divine. Yet even as he grew in strength, his heart was prone to wander. Strength without discipline is like a wild storm, powerful but destructive. Samson's strength became his identity, but it also became his downfall. His victories were overshadowed by his impulsiveness. Despite his calling to lead Israel, his passions often led him astray. Samson's pride in his riddle turned to fury when his wife betrayed him, revealing the answer to the Philistines. What began as a wedding became a war. Samson's revenge consumed the Philistines' crops, escalating the conflict. His strength, meant for deliverance, became a tool for personal vendettas. Then came Delilah, the woman whose beauty and cunning would unravel the mighty Samson. The Philistines saw in her a weapon to exploit his weakness. 3 times Samson lied to her, and 3 times she tried to trap him. But her persistence was relentless, her betrayal complete. The mighty Samson, blinded and bound, became a prisoner of his enemies. Samson, once a symbol of power, was now humiliated. But in his suffering, he found humility. In his death, Samson fulfilled his mission. He began the deliverance of Israel, even at the cost of his life. As Samson's fame spread, so too did the weight of his calling. He was a man caught between his divine purpose and his human desires. Tonight, under the vast heavens, he wrestled with the burden of his destiny. Samson's strength was not just physical, it was a symbol of God's presence. But his struggle to reconcile his calling with his desires would lead him further into temptation. Samson, ever bold, walked into the heart of enemy territory. The city of Gaza was a Philistine stronghold, its gates towering and secure. But no walls could contain the man whom God had empowered. As the Philistines prepared to trap him, Samson's strength once again defied their plans. With sheer, unmatched strength, Samson tore the gates from their foundations. He carried them to the top of a hill, a silent declaration of Israel's defiance against the Philistines. But even this display of power could not mask the inner turmoil brewing within him. For each victory drew him closer to the edge of his downfall, where his strength would fail him and his faith would be tested. Samson's victories brought Israel hope, but his choices troubled those who loved him most. His parents, who had raised him under the Nazirite vow, now saw a son torn between his calling and his desires. Samson's strength set him apart, but it also isolated him. The love and guidance of those who cared for him most often fell on deaf ears. Blinded and imprisoned, Samson was no longer the mighty warrior feared by the Philistines. Yet in his darkness, he found clarity. Stripped of his strength and pride, he turned to the God who had never abandoned him. In his blindness, Samson began to see clearly. His final act would not be for himself, but for the God who had called him from birth. Samson's final act of faith brought destruction to Israel's enemies. He killed more Philistines in his death than he had during his life, but his sacrifice also left his people reflecting on the man he was and the legacy he left behind. Samson's life was a paradox of strength and weakness, faith and failure. But in his final act, he became a symbol of redemption. His story reminds us that God's purposes prevail, even when we fall short. Through Samson's death, Israel saw the power of God at work. His sacrifice was not the end. It was the beginning of hope for a people longing for deliverance. Samson's life is a paradox, a story of strength and weakness, faith and failure, pride and redemption. His story teaches us that strength, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, must be guided by discipline and purpose. Our greatest weaknesses often lie in our unguarded desires. Even in failure, God's purpose can prevail if we turn back to Him. We all face battles like Samson, temptations that test our faith and decisions that shape our destiny. Like Samson, we are called to rise above our weaknesses and fulfill our God-given purpose. His story is not just his own, it is ours. Let it remind us to live with strength, humility, and unwavering trust in the one who calls us. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the powerful story of Samson and Delilah, the rise and fall of a judge. We hope this tale of strength, redemption, and purpose has inspired you to reflect on your own life and the battles we all face. If you enjoyed this performance and want to see more stories that explore timeless lessons and themes, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with others. Your support helps us bring more meaningful stories to life.